everyone, I'm Phil Lipoff. Thanks so much for streaming with us today. Breaking news right now in the fight against COVID-19. Merck has submitted its COVID treatment for FDA authorization. The drug is a first of its kind and was found to dramatically reduce the risk of hospitalization and death. We will have more on that coming up in a few moments. First, Southwest Airlines has canceled at least 300 more flights this morning. That's after nixing more than 1,800 flights over the weekend. The airline has apologized to both passengers and its employees, some of whom were stranded without a hotel. Southwest blames the travel chaos on bad weather in Florida, compounded by air traffic control issues. However, the FAA tells ABC News no FAA traffic shortages have been reported since Friday. And it's Marathon Monday in Boston. The marathon kicked off this morning. About 18,000 runners hit the road starting in Hopkinton, Massachusetts. And about 30,000 people are actually going to be running virtually this year as well. But we are going to begin with that news from drug maker Merck submitting its anti-COVID medication for FDA authorization. Merck found the pill would reduce the risk of hospitalization and death by 50%. Chief National Correspondent Matt Gutman with the latest.
Drug maker Merck will be the first to apply for FDA authorization of an oral medicine to treat COVID-19. Clinical data suggests that for a person testing positive, 4 pills taken every 12 hours at home for 5 days can reduce the risk of hospitalization or death by 50%. And as the nation waits for news on how soon that authorization may come, more hope just around the corner. Dr. Anthony Fauci making the point that as long as you are vaccinated, Halloween should be safe. A lot of that reassurance coming from a layer of protection from parents who are vaccinated, and the fact that activities like trick-or-treating generally happen outdoors. In the coming cooler months, Fauci noting COVID-19 cases are likely to drop as they have been recently. Nationwide, COVID-19 hospitalizations, cases, and deaths are declining from highs that were blamed on the Delta variant seen just weeks ago. But experts continue to be concerned that if enough people remain unvaccinated, the virus could rebound. In the middle of the intensifying battle over mandates, the country's largest sheriff's department, Los Angeles County, suspending enforcement of countywide vaccine requirements for employees.
I'm not forcing anyone. The issue has become so politicized, there are entire groups of employees that are willing to be fired and laid off rather than get vaccinated.
Sheriff Alex Villanueva saying it's not political, but that he simply cannot afford to lose employees during a labor shortage. Phil, sheriff's aides tell me that they're concerned that if he does try to enforce this vaccine mandate, 5 to 10% of the entire workforce of 18,000 people might, quote, walk out overnight. LA County does have one of the most strict COVID vaccine mandates in the country, with exemptions only for religious or medical purposes. Now, getting back to that new Merck antiviral drug, this is a potential global game changer because it would only require a prescription and a trip to the pharmacy. Now, it does seem to work best only in mild cases and in preventing hospitalizations. And of course, there's a long way to go before it's authorized by the FDA. Phil.
Matt Gutman, thank you. We're going to turn now to that strong storm system that is on the move. More than 23 million people are on alert for severe weather. Chief Meteorologist Ginger Z is tracking the latest for us. Hey, Ginger, what's happening out there?
Autumn severe storms moving through Oklahoma. You can see that shelf cloud. That is just a monster, bringing with it in Chickasha up to 82-mile-per-hour wind gusts. Those were the straight line winds, but there were 11 reported tornadoes from Oklahoma over to Missouri. So the severe weather not only included tornadoes, yes, that you can see kind of a funnel trying to form there in Oklahoma, but also hail. And lots of it. And that's the thing, is we've seen the potential for this storm. It's already showed us what it can do, and it will do that again today, right through Illinois, into Indiana, parts of Michigan, even Wisconsin. So it's that low-pressure system, something we call the triple point, right by the cold front and the warm front, right where it meets there. Enough circulation in the atmosphere, you could certainly see tornadoes spin up again, especially in some of those suburbs of Chicago, late afternoon through the early evening into southwest Michigan. And yes, Indianapolis is included in that risk area today. So that one will be moving to the north and east, but we do have another to watch, and that's going to include Hayes and Garden City and Woodward. That's for tomorrow. So that's the new one tomorrow for damaging winds and, yes, tornadoes. So we do have that second season, but we know what comes along with a big temperature gradient that causes severe weather. Cold and snow. This is Lee Canyon, Nevada. We saw a lot of that throughout Utah, and that was the first storm. But now there's a second that's going to bring in not only the snow, 1 to 2 feet in some parts of the northern Rockies, parts of Montana and Wyoming, but in Las Vegas, you could see gusts up to 60 miles per hour. Henderson, same thing, down through Southern California, high wind warnings. We're talking about 45 to 65 mile per hour wind gusts. Not helpful if you're dry, if you got any fires blowing. And right up north, look at that. Look what the snow looks like, even 3 to 6 inches for all the gray area there.
All right, Ginger Z, thank you. Selma Blair is sharing the latest in her journey with MS. The actress spoke to our Robin Roberts about her health, her battle after receiving an experimental treatment, and revealing how her outlook on life has changed. Here's Robin with more.
I'm so sorry, I can't talk right now. We're shooting the final days of my life.
Introducing Selma Blair like you've never seen her before. The actress revealing in a new documentary how she is embracing her second act, living with multiple sclerosis.
Well, first of all, at this very moment, how are you?
At this very moment, I'm great. And it is important to say at this very moment, and I don't want to be complaining, although I always say I have no complaints, but do you have a minute? It's like my joyful thing, but in all reality, I am great today. I need more gains than losses, and I do have things that can sometimes be embarrassing, but this is part of it that I do want to show, because that's the part that's healing and perfect and acceptance. The glitches, maybe some of the speech. My brain is neurologically free of forming new lesions, but I do have a volume loss in some speech and movement areas and prefrontal damage and things that I take medicine for, throughout the day.
Selma first sharing her MS diagnosis on Instagram in 2018. Months later, revealing on GMA her daily battle with the disease.
Vulnerability is a strength, my friend. It's not a weakness.
What I saw when people came up after an Instagram post, or especially our show, your show that I was on, thank you, how much it meant, and that moved me more than I've been moved by other things that I had achieved in my life or done. And visibility, how much it matters just to move the needle for young children to think, yes, I can do this, or I can show like this, because repressing and isolating is a real energy drain. I'm sick today.
The options ran out. A stem cell transplant is the thing that's gonna help me, if anything will.
The documentary focusing on her 2019 stem cell transplant, a still experimental therapy for MS that includes intensive rounds of chemo to help reboot the immune system. But it is not a cure.
What went into the decision process to have the stem cell transplant? Because it's not FDA approved yet for MS. What was it about it that you said, I'm going to take a chance here?
I kind of got to a critical point of my nervous system and more symptoms, and I couldn't stay awake.
I'm in a ball in my bed. Everything's so blurry. This is gonna pass.
I was mortally afraid of chemo my whole life. I'm someone that's always gone holistic when I can. And I met with Dr. Burr, and he said, before you go home to California, I'm gonna give you some chemo tonight. We're to see how you do. One dose of chemo the next day. I was on the plane talking clearly. That quick, the inflammation started to go down.
By her side, her 10-year-old son, Arthur, a constant support, and her beloved mom, who passed away in 2020 during the filming of the documentary.
What would your mother think about the film?
One, she would say something, honestly. She would be furious that I didn't put on the dog, that I'm not made up. But I think she would be proud. And I do wish that she would see that now I would love to know her in a whole different way instead of her daughter who didn't feel well, which was a lot of our relationship. I didn't feel well my whole life. I wish she could see that I'm okay.
How is your life different post-stem cell transplant compared to pre?
I am a different person. I chose this as a marker in my life to want to live, to want to be a person that can show other people with chronic illness, disabilities, and injury they can't get over. A hit. I just took a hit. And and we take hits, and resilience is possible, and there's work.
Return to acting?
It's the right thing. I'm not looking, but God knows I would never say I wouldn't dream of being a part of an amazing set one day.
You know, watching Selma on the big screen has brought joy to many, something she says she's finally experiencing herself.
We have to take care of ourselves and be patient, and better times come. Maybe not for good, maybe it's not a cure, but more than not, better times will come. We're meant to have joy on this earth. I never felt that before.
Our thanks and best to Selma Blair and, of course, Robin for that interview. Coming up, today is Indigenous Peoples Day, and this year marks the first time a U.S. president has formally recognized the day. When we come back, a closer look at what that kind of recognition means. Welcome back, everyone. Many people across the country are observing Indigenous Peoples Day today, which celebrates Indigenous people and honors their communities and their culture. This year marks the first time a U.S. president has formally recognized the day. President Biden issued a proclamation on Friday observing today, October 11th, as a day to honor Native Americans and their contributions to American history. Joining me now is Matthew Fletcher, professor of law and the director of the Indigenous Law and Policy Center at Michigan State University. Professor, thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here. I appreciate it.
Great. Right off the bat, how significant is it that a U.S. president has formally recognized Indigenous Peoples Day?
Well, it's pretty significant. I mean, we've come full circle from 1792, when the very first proclamation was issued on Columbus Day. So, you know, Christopher Columbus wasn't even a real person. The name of the person was Cristobal Colon from Italy. And so for a president to come around and say that the contributions of indigenous peoples, of Native Americans to the United States are equal to, if not superior to that of the discoverer, so to speak, is really quite remarkable.
And yet I feel like it's in the lexicon of so many people these days. Both of my kids use it as if it's always been, but it's not. The day is not yet a federal holiday, but there is a bill in Congress proposing to make it one. What would that recognition mean to Indigenous peoples all across the country?
Well, it would set a tone for how our children are taught in schools. There is a history to the United States that is incredibly complex, and it's a benefit to all Americans to have a greater sense of what the complexities are, that there were good and bad things that came out of relationships between the United States, America, and non-Indian American citizens and the indigenous peoples. There's an enormous amount of cultural and political give and take that has benefited the United States more generally between Indian people and non-Indian people. And so I think that that acknowledgement would really help to cement that sort of understanding.
There are a lot of ways, but if you can pinpoint a few, how have contributions by Indigenous people been overlooked throughout our nation's history?
Well, let's just start with food. About 2/3 of all the kinds of staples of food in the world comes from the Western Hemisphere. Things like chocolate and squash, so tomatoes, all of that comes from the United States, from the indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere. Politically, Native people have been, in the past 50 years or so, been really creative, true laboratories of democracy in terms of developing new ideas on child welfare, pollution control, conservation, the kind of interactions between governments, national governments and state, local, and tribal governments have all been tribes have really been on the cutting edge. And very few people know that tribes are really engaging in this activity.
And representation within the U.S. government, White House Interior Secretary Deb Haaland is the first Native American to hold that position. What does that kind of representation mean to Indigenous people?
Well, very specifically, it means that there is finally a high-level inclusion of Native peoples in the national government, the American government. The Department of the Interior, one could argue, was founded to deal with the, quote, Indian problem. But the problem there is that the solution involves Indian people and Native American people. And so these interactions, these major decisions that involve that implicate all Americans, that are important to all Americans, are finally being addressed from a perspective of a Native and Indigenous woman, which is really quite remarkable.
Finally, Professor, how will Indigenous people across the country be celebrating this holiday? And actually tell us how some cities have celebrated it in the past.
Well, you're starting to see more and more cities, and I think as many as 12 states have issued proclamations or even identified the date as a state or local holiday. You will see marches that involve certainly protests, but there will also be celebrations of culture and language. Native people have fought very hard to maintain their traditions in light of a lot of ignorance about Indian people and a lot of, frankly, assimilation and oppression. And they should celebrate. We should all celebrate the differences between us, the plurality within our cultures. And you're starting to see more and more of that across the country. And it's really quite amazing.
Professor Matthew Fletcher, thanks so much for taking the time on this Indigenous Peoples Day.
Thank you very much. Miigwech.
All right. Coming up, the final frontier for William Shatner. We are counting down until he blasts off with the rest of his Blue Origin crew. When we come back, we'll hear from the Star Trek star himself ahead of liftoff. Welcome back. Star Trek star William Shatner and the Blue Origin crew counting down to blast off on Wednesday now, which would make 90-year-old Shatner the oldest person ever to go to space. The trip will only be 11 minutes long, but it will offer a rare glimpse of what Earth looks like that very few humans have seen. Gio Benitez is in Texas near the launch site with more.
Captain Kirk himself, William Shatner, is ready to boldly go where few have gone before.
Kirk Enterprise. Scott here, sir. We're beaming up.
After rising to fame playing his iconic role on Star Trek, Shatner, now 90 years old, is set to become the oldest person ever to go to space, soaring about 60 miles above the Earth's surface, hitting that weightlessness in zero gravity for about 4 minutes.
I plan to be looking out the window with my nose pressed against the window. The only thing I don't want to see is a little gremlin looking back at me.
Still vigilant after his in-flight experience on the Twilight Zone.
There's a man out there.
His ride to the edge of space, the Blue Origin news ship owned by Jeff Bezos.
Go, Jeff, go, Mark, go, Wally, go, Oliver. You are going to space.
It was just 2 months ago when 82-year-old Wally Funk launched and landed safely in that same spaceship. Now, the trip won't be long, just 11 minutes, but it'll offer a view of Earth few humans have ever seen.
What a cool flight that I think captures the imagination of so many of us to see, you know, Captain Kirk, William Shatner, getting to fly in space.
And it has professional NASA astronauts giving Captain Kirk some advice.
Try to get out as many of his catchphrases as he can while he's weightless. I'd love, like a beam me up, Scotty.
Rocket Man.
And now Shatner, who loves writing and performing music, says as soon as he returns back to Earth, he's writing a new song. And we will all be waiting for that song. Now listen, the launch was supposed to happen tomorrow morning. That's not going to happen anymore. And that's because the forecast calls for some very strong winds. So instead, they're just going to go ahead and delay the launch just a little bit by just a day. Now it's scheduled for Wednesday morning. It's just too dangerous to try to launch this rocket when it's just that windy. Phil?
Understood. Gio, thank you. And earlier on Good Morning America, TJ Holmes spoke to William Shatner and the whole Blue Origin crew about their upcoming journey to the edge of space. Let's listen.
You waited all this time to go to space. What's a one-day delay? I know weather has delayed the trip by a day, but given the circumstances, is that no big deal or a cause for concern?
Well, that's no big deal for you because you're warm and comfortable in your studio. A big deal for us.
Well, I know you have to keep an eye on weather, but did it feel like a bit of a disappointment that you have to wait one more day?
Yeah, I'm deeply disappointed because I was building up the enthusiastic response, and now we've got to wait another day. But as you point out, it is really worth it. What's a day with this extraordinary experience that we're about to have?
And Mr. Shatner, you have inspired generations, imaginations for generations with your iconic character. Do you take this now? That was Captain Kirk, but here is William Shatner sitting here about to go to space. Do you take this also as an opportunity to inspire?
No, I'm taking it as an experience.
Okay, you're done with the inspiration business. This is you taking a joyride here. Audrey, let me bring you in for a second here. You're an engineer. You're a lawyer. You sat at the table for many other missions and mission control, essentially, in the past in your career. Why now take this leap and go into this seat now?
Well, it was a very generous offer to me to represent all of my colleagues and friends at Blue that have been working on this program for a very long time, and they offered me the opportunity to represent all those great people and sit in the seat. So I could not be more overwhelmed at the opportunity, and I feel an enormous sense of responsibility to represent this team.
Chris and Glenn, let me bring you all in here. You all are the quote-unquote paying customers, right, on this trip. But you all have backgrounds in research and clinical research. And Chris, are you taking this simply as like I mentioned, a joyride, but also are you going to take this as an opportunity to learn and continue some of your work and research?
Yeah, so I've worked in the space industry my entire life, and I'm excited that the doors to space are finally opening. And I think we'll look back at this day 50 years from now and go, this is the year where the human race finally started going to space, all of us. I think it's really exciting to be part of that.
Glenn, what about you?
This is how innovation happens. I lived it in healthcare and life sciences. When you think about an industry that's being created and the opportunity for us to fuel that industry, as Chris was saying, this is the beginning of a new time for space, and we're on the beginning of a curve that is going to just blast off. That's a metaphor for that adventure that we're literally going to have together. Hey, can't wait.
Mr. Shatner, let me ask you here finally, what's the over-under? Is there a betting line about how many times you're going to be called Captain Kirk on this trip?
Actually, I haven't heard Shatner in a long time.
I'm just going to say it. William Shatner is a national treasure. My opinion. Our thanks to TJ Holmes, William Shatner, and of course the entire Blue Origin crew. You can watch the launch 9:30 a.m. Eastern right here Wednesday on ABC News Live. And that does it for this hour. I'm Phil Lipoff. Thanks for joining us. Remember, ABC News Live is here for you all day with the latest news, context, and analysis. I'll see you right back here at 3 p.m. Eastern with Terry Moran. Have a great day.
Good evening and welcome to the first of 3 debates among the major candidates for President of the United States, sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debates. The candidates are Independent candidate Ross Perot, Governor Bill Clinton, the Democratic nominee, and President George Bush, the Republican nominee.
Hi everyone, George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.